Friday, day 3 of the Valentine's Day email situation. Deutsche Bank just filed emergency asset protection motion, 8:47 a.m. this morning. Requests court authority to freeze $38 million in accounts tied to 3 Trump entities. 3 days, 11 major developments. Here's where we are. Single email leaked Wednesday morning. 2 banks pulled credit lines Thursday. 3rd bank seeking asset freeze today. Today changed Trump's financial exposure completely. Banks aren't just walking away, they're protecting themselves against defaults. But most coverage is treating each bank action as a separate story. I'm going to show you the complete timeline, where this email came from, where the bank panic is now, where 3 separate legal tracks are going, 3 tracks, all moving, all connected. By the end, you'll see why one February 14th email is dismantling Trump's corporate credit structure. Let's map this out. Current situation. Trump. 3 entities with frozen or threatened credit, $127 million in immediate obligations, scrambling for replacement financing. Banks. Deutsche Bank seeking freeze, Capital One credit line terminated, Wells Fargo reviewing relationship, NY Attorney General opened investigation into whether email evidences new fraud beyond civil judgment. Active proceedings, Arrow Deutsche Bank emergency motion, federal court asset freeze, Arrow NYAG, criminal fraud investigation, state level, Arrow loan covenant default review, multiple lenders, private, immediate pressure points, August 7th, $47 million, Trump Tower refinancing due, Capital One won't extend. August 15th, Deutsche Bank oral arguments on freeze motion. That's the snapshot. Now let me show you how one email from February 14th, 2025, 17 months ago, became 3 separate legal crises this week. The beginning, February 14th, 2025, Donald Trump Jr. sends email to Eric Trump and Trump Organization CFO about property valuations for Deutsche Bank refinancing package. Subject line, DB wants updated use Bedminster approach. What happened? Arrow email references inflating golf course valuations by 35%. Arrow specifically mentions worked with Capital One last year. Arrow CFO replies, same methodology as 2019 AG case. Each line, direct admission they were using valuation methods New York already ruled fraudulent. Day 1. Wednesday, July 29th, 6:23 a.m. New York Times publishes full email. Leaked by former Trump org employee as part of wrongful termination lawsuit discovery. Email shows Trump family discussing fraud methodology 17 months after $454 million judgment. Immediate reaction, Arrow Deutsche Bank, legal team convenes emergency review. Arrow Capital One compliance flags all Trump-related facilities. Arrow NYAG. Letitia James tweets, reviewing immediately. 94 minutes? That's how fast Deutsche Bank lawyers assembled. What most people missed? Email wasn't sent to Trump directly, but Bedminster approach references methodology he personally testified about in 2023 trial shows continued use after judgment. Day 2, Thursday, July 30th, 2:47 p.m., Capital One sends termination notice on $64 million credit facility supporting Trump Tower and 40 Wall Street. This changed from banks reviewing to banks exiting. Credit termination, not just non-renewal, triggers cross-default clauses in other agreements. New players entered. Arrow Wells Fargo announced comprehensive relationship review. Arrow Axos Bank, previously backed Trump, declined to comment, but stock dropped 6%. The story split into multiple financial institution tracks. Day 3, Friday, July 31st, today, 8:47 a.m., Deutsche Bank files emergency motion for asset freeze on accounts containing $38 million. This is where we are now. The pattern. Each day, banks move from internal review to public action. Each day, Trump's available credit contracted, review determination to freeze. 3 days, one leaked email became bank exodus plus potential criminal fraud plus asset freeze. The original email proved Trump Organization continued fraudulent valuations after civil judgment, exactly what banks' loan covenants prohibited, and exactly what turned civil fraud into criminal fraud. Subscribe. This timeline keeps expanding and banks are moving faster than Trump's lawyers can respond. Yesterday's key development, Capital One terminated $64 million credit facility with 30-day notice instead of normal 90-day wind down. Why it mattered: accelerated timeline prevents Trump from securing replacement financing, triggered cross-default provisions in at least 2 other loan agreements. What it set up forced Deutsche Bank to decide whether to protect their position before other creditors seized assets. Specific example, before yesterday, Deutsche Bank was monitoring with $142 million in outstanding Trump loans. After yesterday, Capital One's termination meant Deutsche Bank faced risk that Trump would prioritize other creditors, move them from observation to defensive action. That shift enabled today's asset freeze motion. Deutsche Bank now competing with other creditors for limited Trump Organization liquid assets. Yesterday's termination letter is why today's freeze request was filed so urgently. Court filings show Deutsche Bank's outside counsel worked through the night after Capital One's 2:47 p.m. notice. Motion filed 18 hours later at 8:47 a.m. today. Deutsche Bank's motion explicitly references Capital One action. Termination by major creditor creates risk of preferential transfers and asset dissipation. Translation: they're worried Trump will pay Capital One $64 million and leave Deutsche holding empty accounts. Yesterday also changed political dynamics. Before, Trump could claim email was taken out of context. After, major banks' public termination citing fraud concerns validated email's significance. Capital One's termination letter, filed publicly, states, recent evidence of misrepresentation regarding asset valuations constitutes material breach of loan covenants. That's bank saying email proves fraud, not political opponent, not prosecutor, but lender with contractual relationship. Yesterday's corporate validation of fraud claims made today's legal escalation inevitable. Today's development, Deutsche Bank filed emergency asset freeze covering $38 million across 3 Trump corporate accounts. 8:47 a.m. Motion requests immediate temporary restraining order pending full hearing. Why this is different from day 1 and day 2. Day 1, email leaked. Evidence available, banks reviewing. Day 2, Capital One, terminated credit. Corporate decision, no court involvement. Day 3, Deutsche Bank sought judicial freeze, legal remedy, court enforcement. 3 specific changes. Change 1, before today, Trump Organization controlled all cash accounts despite bank concerns. After today, court could freeze $38 million within 48 hours if TRO granted. Change 2, before today, bank exodus was corporate lending decisions. After today, banks using courts to protect position shifts from business to litigation. Change 3, before today, Trump could prioritize creditors, pay some before others. After today, if freeze granted, court controls disbursement, Trump loses control of payment priority. The cumulative effect. 3 days ago, Trump had normal corporate relationships with multiple banks. 2 days ago, largest lender pulled credit line. Today, second largest lender asked court to freeze his money. Each day escalated from corporate to judicial. Today made this a legal battle, not just business relationships. Deutsche Bank's 47-page motion includes analysis showing Trump Organization has $127 million in obligations due next 45 days, but only $93 million in liquid assets across all entities. That math problem is why freeze matters. If Deutsche freezes $38 million, Trump has $55 million available for $127 million in obligations. Can't cover everyone, someone doesn't get paid. Today's freeze motion forces Trump to choose which creditors to default on, and every default triggers more cross-default clauses. Today transformed this from banks are worried to banks are competing for insufficient assets through court system. See how each day built on the last? Like this if the timeline breakdown helps. This isn't one story anymore, it's 3. Track 1, Deutsche Bank asset freeze. Status, emergency motion filed this morning in SDNY Federal Court. Key date, Monday, August 3rd. Judge Naomi Rice Buchwald will hear TRO arguments. What happens? If granted, $38 million frozen immediately pending full hearing. If denied, Deutsche Bank likely joins other creditors in involuntary bankruptcy petition. Track 2, NY Attorney General criminal investigation status. Preliminary inquiry open Thursday. Grand jury presentation possible. Key date, August 12th AG. James scheduled press conference. Topic undisclosed. What happens if email evidence sufficient, criminal fraud indictment for continuing fraudulent practices after civil judgment, potential charges against Trump Jr., Eric Trump, and CFO. Track 3, cross-default cascade, status, Capital One termination triggered review clauses and 7 other loan agreements. Key date, August 7th, Trump Tower refinancing deadline. What happens? If Trump can't secure $47 million replacement financing, defaults trigger acceleration clauses in $280 million additional debt. How they connect. Track 1, freeze outcome affects Track 3, defaults because frozen funds can't be used for August 7th payment guarantees at least 1 default. Track 2, criminal outcome affects Track 1, civil freeze. Because indictment would strengthen Deutsche Bank's risk of asset dissipation argument. They're not separate. They're synchronized. If Track 1 moves first, Monday, freeze granted. Track 3 defaults become inevitable. Track 2 investigation has additional evidence of financial distress suggesting flight risk. If Track 2 moves first, August 12th indictments. Track 1 freeze becomes easier to obtain. Track 3 creditors panic and accelerate all demands. Every track makes the others worse. Deutsche Bank freeze prevents covering defaults. Defaults prove financial distress supporting criminal flight risk. Criminal charges spook remaining lenders into demanding payment. 3 separate proceedings creating unified collapse. Who matters at this point? Donald Trump. Position: defending on 3 fronts with limited liquid assets, no new credit sources. Strategy: trying to prevent Deutsche freeze Monday while securing bridge financing before August 7th default. Power: still controls unfrozen assets, but shrinking options each day without new credit makes position worse. Deutsche Bank legal team. Position: lead creditor with most exposure, $142 million, first to seek judicial remedy. Strategy: freeze assets before other creditors claim them. Establish senior position and payment priority. Power: federal court access, emergency motion authority, detailed financial records from lending relationship. NYAG Letitia. James. Position: already has $454 million civil judgment, now investigating criminal charges. Strategy: use email as evidence of contempt, violating judgment terms, and new criminal fraud. Power: grand jury access, subpoena authority, criminal prosecution powers. Judge Naomi Rice Buchwald, SDNY. Position: assigned to Deutsche Bank. Emergency motion. Monday hearing scheduled. Strategy: will determine if asset freeze justified by risk analysis. Power: can freeze $38 million immediately through TRO. Who dropped out? Trump's traditional lenders, Axos Bank, Ladder Capital, and others who previously refinanced his properties are now refusing inquiries. Reputational risk too high post-email. The power dynamic shifted from Trump negotiating with banks, day 1, to banks terminating relationships, day 2, to banks asking courts for protection from Trump, day 3. This is complex. Stay with me, the legal choreography gets clearer when you see the critical moments. Why 3 days matters: corporate creditors can use civil fraud judgments as basis for immediate defensive legal action. They don't have to wait for default. The precedent: before this week, bank finds evidence of fraud, leads to waits for actual payment, default leads to then takes legal action. After this week, bank finds evidence of fraud, leads to immediately seeks asset freeze before default leads to protects position proactively. Concrete example: you own business with outstanding loans. Lender discovers you lied on loan application. Before, lender would demand payment, maybe accelerate loan, but let you try to pay. After, lender goes straight to court for freeze, prevents you from using your own money to pay them or anyone else. 3 days created preemptive creditor defense doctrine. Deutsche Bank isn't alleging Trump defaulted on their loan. They're alleging fraud in other contexts creates risk of future default, so freeze assets now. That's new. Previously, creditors needed actual breach. Deutsche Bank is arguing potential breach evidenced by pattern of fraud is sufficient. If Judge Buchwald grants Monday's freeze, that becomes precedent. Every creditor in America gains new power. Find evidence your debtor defrauded someone else. Freeze their assets even if they're current on payments to you. Completely changes debtor-creditor dynamics. Fraud in one relationship becomes justification for defensive action by all creditors. Trump's February 14th email didn't just expose his continued fraud, it's creating new creditor rights that will outlast his specific case. 3 days that changed commercial lending law. 3 moments that mattered most. Moment 1, email leak, Wednesday 6:23 a.m., when Wednesday morning, New York Times publication. What happened? Full email published with attachments showing valuation methodology, matching methods from 2019 fraud case. Why it was critical: this wasn't speculation or accusation, it was Trump executives' own words admitting they used fraud methods after judgment. If this hadn't happened, banks would have continued normal lending relationships, no evidence of post-judgment fraud pattern. Moment 2, Capital One 30-day termination, Thursday 2:47 p.m., when, Thursday afternoon, accelerated termination notice. What happened? Capital One chose 30-day exit instead of standard 90-day wind-down period. Why it was critical: this created immediate liquidity crisis. Trump can't replace $64 million in 30 days and triggered cross defaults. If this hadn't happened, Trump would have time to refinance orderly, prevent cascade of defaults. Moment 3, Deutsche Bank overnight brief, Thursday 8 p.m. to Friday 8:47 a.m., when, Thursday evening through Friday morning, legal team working emergency motion. What happened? Deutsche Bank decided to seek judicial freeze rather than just demand payment. Why it was critical: this chose litigation over negotiation, moved from banking relationship to court battle, and set precedent for preemptive creditor action. If this hadn't happened, Deutsche Bank would have joined queue of creditors demanding payment, no one controlling Trump's asset movement. Those 3 moments determined we're headed to asset freeze litigation instead of negotiated workout. Each moment eliminated off-ramps. Email leak made continued relationship impossible. Capital One's speed prevented refinancing solution. Deutsche Bank's overnight motion made this judicial instead of commercial. By Friday morning, Trump faced judge deciding if he can access his own account's trajectory set by 3 specific decisions in 48 hours. Like if this timeline breakdown shows the pattern, 3 moments, 3 tracks, all connected. What happens over the next week? Monday, August 3rd, 10 a.m., Judge Buchwald hears Deutsche Bank TRO arguments in SDNY. Likely outcome: grants temporary freeze on $38 million pending full hearing. Trump's emergency opposition brief filed tomorrow, unlikely to overcome bank's detailed financial analysis. Alternative: denies TRO but schedules expedited preliminary injunction hearing, same result, slightly delayed. Tuesday to Wednesday, August 4th to 5th, Trump Organization attempts emergency refinancing with second-tier lenders. Wells Fargo expected to announce relationship decision, likely exit. These connect because Wells Fargo exit eliminates another $47 million in available credit, makes refinancing terms worse for any replacement lender. Thursday, August 6th, major decision point. Trump Tower refinancing negotiations reach deadline. 3 possible outcomes. 1. Secures replacement financing at punitive rates, 15% plus versus previous 6%. Avoids default but devastating to cash flow. 2. Attempts to use frozen Deutsche funds blocked by TRO, creates contempt issue 3. Requests forbearance from current lender, shows weakness, invites additional demands. Friday, August 7th, $47 million Trump Tower payment due. If frozen funds inaccessible and no replacement financing, first actual default occurs. This determines whether cross-default clauses activate across portfolio. Next week, August 10th to 14th, NYAG grand jury presentation likely begins. Typical timing after preliminary inquiry. Additional lenders expected to demand early payment or accelerate loans. Deutsche Bank full preliminary injunction hearing scheduled. By next Friday, August 14th. We'll know. Arrow. Whether Deutsche Freeze was granted and held arrow, whether Trump Tower payment defaulted arrow, whether NYAG is proceeding with criminal charges. The pattern suggests multiple defaults by August 14th. 3 days showed banks moving faster than Trump can refinance, and Monday freeze, if granted, makes default mathematically certain. Trump needs $127 million available in next 45 days. If $38 million frozen Monday, he has $55 million. Math doesn't work. Someone doesn't get paid. Defaults trigger acceleration. Acceleration creates more defaults. Next 7 days determine whether this is controlled wind down or chaotic collapse. Subscribe. Next 7 days determine how this ends. Monday's hearing decides if Trump controls his own money. Complete current state, legal/regulatory status. Arrow Deutsche Bank freeze motion filed. Monday hearing scheduled. Arrow NYAG criminal investigation. Active grand jury presentation expected. Arrow cross default reviews. 7 loan agreements under creditor examination. Key players positions. Trump $93 million liquid assets. $127 million obligations next 45 days. No new credit sources. Math crisis. Deutsche Bank. $142 million exposure, seeking $38 million freeze. Monday hearing offensive legal position. NYAG. James has email evidence investigating criminal fraud. August 12th, press conference prosecution authority, locked variables. Email content is public record. Capital One termination is final. Deutsche motion is filed. August 7th, deadline exists. Open variables, whether Monday freeze is granted, whether Trump finds replacement financing, whether NYAG indicts, which creditor defaults first. Timeline trajectory, day 1, email leaked evidence problem. Day 2, Capital One terminated credit problem. Day 3, Deutsche Bank freeze motion liquidity problem. Pattern, escalating from evidence to commercial to judicial. Next inflection point, Monday 10 a.m. Judge Buchwald's TRO decision. If freeze granted, defaults become inevitable. If freeze denied, Trump has few days to refinance before August 7th. Either way, timeline is compressed. 3 days turned 1 leaked email into existential threat to Trump Organization's credit structure. Not political, not criminal, yet financial. Banks protecting themselves using courts. Trump facing math problem, insufficient assets for obligations, and timeline running out. 5 things to track. 1. Monday 10 a.m. hearing. If Buchwald grants TRO $38 million frozen immediately, default's mathematically certain. If Buchwald denies, Trump has 4 days to find $47 million before default. 2. Trump's opposition brief watch for whether he claims fraud allegations are false or argues freeze is procedurally improper, tells us if he's fighting facts or fighting remedy. Fighting facts means NYAG case stronger. 3. Wells Fargo decision could change everything if they announce continued relationship would signal other banks overreacting. Unlikely but possible. Major bank breaks from exodus pattern. 4. 3-day escalation pattern. If Monday hearing escalates like days 1 to 3, criminal charges next. If pattern breaks, settlement negotiations might be happening quietly. 5. The question. Ultimately, can Trump Organization survive without traditional banking relationships? Monday's freeze decision starts answering it. I'll be covering Monday's hearing in real time. Complete timeline update after, full creditor cascade analysis when defaults start.